Welcome, everyone. We'll be getting started in just a few moments. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so pleased to invite you to join us tonight. Hello, everyone, and thank you for stopping into our live stream with Rajiv Mohabir and Ilan Stavans for Antiman, which has just hit the shelves. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. For anyone who is new to the game here, I'd like to tell you a little bit about who we are and who we've got joining us tonight. First up, if you haven't met us before, we are Lost City Books. We are a used, new, and rare bookstore located in Adams Morgan, Washington, D.C. And we are run by a close-knit team of some of DC's coolest folks, myself included. We have artists, educators, musicians, writers, and of course, avid readers all coming together to create this unique environment and curate an eclectic selection of books, such as the one we are here to discuss tonight. I am your host for tonight. As always, Shady Rose. I'm very pleased to be here. Let's talk about our guests of honor tonight. Rajiv Mahabhir is the author of Cutlish, Four-Way Books 2021, The Cowherd's Son, and The Taxidermist's Cut, which is the 2016 winner of the Four-Way Books Intro to Poetry Prize and finalist for the Lambda Literary Award for Gay Poetry in 2017, and translator of I Even Regret Night, Holy Songs of Demerara, 1916 and 2019, which received the Penheim Translation Fund Grant Award and the Harold Morton Landon Translation Award from the Academy of American Poets. His essays can be found in places like Asian American Writers Workshops, The Margins, Bamboo, Ridge Journal, Moco Magazine, Cherry Tree, Quayle, and others. And he has a notable essay in Best American Essays 2018. Currently, he is an assistant professor of poetry in the MFA program at Emerson College. His debut memoir, Antiman, won the Restless Books Prize for New Immigrant Writing. I'm really excited to talk about that because someone from Restless Books is here with us as well. Ilan Stavans is the publisher of Restless Books and the Lewis C. Ring Professor of Humanities, Latin American and Latino Culture at Amherst College. His books include On Borrowed Words, Spanglish, Dictionary Days, The Disappearance, and A Critic's Journey. He has edited the Norton Anthology of Latino Literature, the 3-volume set Isaac Bashevis Singer Collected Stories, the poetry of Pablo Neruda, among dozens of other volumes. He is the recipient of numerous awards and honors, including a Guggenheim Fellowship, Chile's Presidential Medal, the International Latino Book Award, and the Jewish Book Award. Stavans' work, translated into 20 languages, has been adapted to the stage and screen. The co-founder of the Great Books Summer Program at Amherst, Stanford, Chicago, Oxford, and Dublin, he is the host of the NPR podcast, In Contrast. And I promised our guest tonight I would keep my talking about Antiman a little short because I really would like to delve into this conversation with the two of you. But Antiman is the winner of the Restless Books Prize for New Immigrant Writing, as we said. Rajiv Mohabir's Antiman is a stunning hybrid memoir that blends literary genres to tackle questions of caste, ethnicity, and sexuality, and to explore the author's experiences as an Indo-Guyanese queer poet and immigrant to the United States. So thank you all for sitting through all of my intros. And without further ado, welcome to our two guests tonight. Hello.
Hello, Shady. Thank you very much for the invitation, and to the wonderful Lost City Books for hosting this event.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. And Rajiv, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. This is such an honor to be launching the book with Lost City Books, and thank you, Shady, for organizing. And then Ilan as well, thank you so much for publishing my book, as well as being here to engage me in conversation. I'm so excited.
So let's start, Rajiv. Let's delve directly into your wonderful book. The first time I read it was in manuscript form when it was submitted to the Restless Books International Immigrant Writing Prize. We get about 400 different manuscripts, sometimes more. It was read by a wide variety of readers of all backgrounds, and it always came out at the very top. I am also thrilled to see how the book has mutated in the process of becoming from manuscript to what it is right now. The gist is in it. It's more matured, more focused, more itself. And as a publisher, I feel very, very proud in having the opportunity of bringing it out. I have a number of themes, topics, questions, Rajiv, that I want to engage you in so that our readers, our viewers can get a taste of the labyrinthine processes that you explore in the book. I want to start with the word Antiman, the title. There are a number of sections in the book that are specifically about language. One of the beauties of the book, and we will talk about it in more detail, is that it is in English, but it's also in other languages. And it is very clear to me that the statement that the book makes is that immigration is not only the arrival to a new language, but it is the coexistence with a number of other languages, a number of other traditions that shape the man that you are today. Antiman, at the same time, is a word that keeps on resonating throughout the book. It is pronounced in different ways. It has different meanings. It's a word that sometimes makes you uncomfortable. Others, you claim it as a form of political statement. I'd love for you to start with the word itself.
Thank you. My goodness, thank you so much. And I'll say something about the kind of shape of it. I'm so indebted to my editor, Nathan Rostron, who is just a fantastic editor who really helped me to polish this into what it is. But the word Antiman, and I thought of this as kind of like, it's a title that's very much in your face. It's definitely a slur for a man who loves other men in the Caribbean. But what I love about it is the kind of depth that it offers me as an immigrant into the country. Anti-man, when we hear it, it could mean anti-man. And so like if I'm putting all of my psychic focus on that word man, I think about gendered expectations of our cisgender heteropatriarchy. And in some ways the epithet on me, the anti-man, has really kind of projected or maybe told the future of my own personal stance, being contrary to these normative ideas of masculinity. That's one thing about this that I really like, the word. Another thing that I really like about this word, and another impact that it has for me as I think through what it means to use this word ethically, is to understand a kind of queerness that exists in the Caribbean outside of the white gaze. And so, gays and the gays of folks from the outside on the inside, and thinking about it as maybe a platform to claim a kind of queerness from the Americas of the global South, or the Anglophone Americas, and how we can then, in this new space of the United States, use it to build solidarities with other folks of color, other queer folks of color here as we come, bringing with us our languages and our traditions. And I think that that's what, you know, on the intellectual level, what I'm hoping Antiman does. For me, my own personal journey through the word was one of, first it was interest, revulsion, upset, and then pride, actually. You know, the first time being called it, it was kind of like an othering. I'm automatically outside of the family, outside of expectation. But then thinking about like, well, yes, you know, queer folks have always lived in ways to survive. And now that I am in a position in my family where I don't necessarily have to shrink this part of my identity, it's something that I can embrace fully. I mean, I have respect for folks who, you know, live in, you know, states of not necessarily being open about sexual identity as it relates to, you know, survival and the constant threat that folks are under.
Now, Rajiv, did the word come first and then the book? Did the book come as a way of explaining the word? In this journey that you have had with a single word, the book is full of other words, words that you adapt and make dance on the page, words that you challenge, words that you reinvent. This word is, as I was mentioning before, a kind of leitmotif, or also a shield, a spade, a wound, a compass. Did you have, in the process of writing the word, as an inspiration? Did the word come later on to give sense and structure to the book?
That's a really great question. I knew that when I wrote the chapter actually titled Antiman, I knew that this was going to be the center of the book. And it was this subconscious kind of thing that I knew. And so maybe on some level, I kind of tailored it in this way, and I wanted to make some kind of like threads throughout. I will say also that, gosh, I think about the kind of ways in which I've seen the word Antiman used in other kind of Caribbean artistic space. You know, there's a short film that was produced, and I watched it at the West Indian Literary Festival in Georgetown, Guyana in 2019, and I was like, oh wow, okay, so the film version does exist. Just a very different story.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think about that, and I think about how people can be seen by experiencing that word, and I think about it myself in whether or not I can see myself reflected in this. You know, when I say something is gay, I had one of my dear friends who's actually in the book. We talk about what it means to be gay in the United States. He's a person of South Asian descent, and you know, we have this idea of like the kind of neoliberal tack-ons to what being gay means, especially in today's world, but then how like a couple of generations ago it was actually quite a radical thing to be, right? And then I look at the kinds of laws enacted in my parents' country of Guyana, South America, and how, you know, the anti-colonial or the colonial anti-sodomy laws, you know, written by King Henry VIII are actually still practiced in you know, this thing. Antiman also locates you know, a kind of epithet for sure, but it also shows like, you know, my own growth into what that means, and the poetry of the word.
The book is a hybrid memoir, and the subtitle of the book, or the key to enter the book, is that it's a hybrid memoir. It is also, and I use this in the best sense of the word, a kind of fractured memoir. A jigsaw puzzle that the reader puts together in order to understand your own journey, and in doing so, it also contributes to the shaping of who the author of the book is. There are sections that are made of poems, there are sections that are made of songs, there are letters, there's dialogue, there's narrative, there's descriptions, and it rotates and it builds in ways that are very jazzy and entertaining and deliberately non-linear. And I want to ask you, to reflect for us on what the form memoir means to you. Being an immigrant myself, we are often asked to deliver a straightforward, consistent, comprehensive story from point A to point Z. And it's a journey of discovery, it's a journey of arrival, of abandonment. But you mix the journeys, you bring all sorts of different voices. Was it always a memoir what you were writing? How did you come to the form of the memoir? Is the memoir also maybe an anthology of various versions of yourself?
Ooh, I love this question. Thank you so much. I kind of want that to be the answer itself. But I will say, I came to thinking about, other ways of writing. Writing poetry was kind of my wheelhouse. It's where I started, exploring my ideas of language and the literary world. A dear friend and mentor of mine, Rigoberto Gonzalez, once said to me, he's like, Rajiv, some stories are too big for poems. And I thought, well, Rigo, like, if they're too big for poems, what else can it be? And he's like, Rigoberto Gonzalez is a master of all genres. He's somebody whose work I have such profound respect for. And then experimenting with that kind of, let's call it the elasticity of the linear. In books of poems, when I structure and organize, I write generally into a couple themes, and then when I put them together is when I'm like, oh, I'm actually doing something here subconsciously, and then I fold them together. Making Antiman was so much a part of this that I thought of, and it's funny, I was thinking of how to position myself and put my poetry and all of this stuff while I was having my first book of poems come out, that I realized that there was actually more of a story behind what led me to poetry than I actually let out in my poems. And I thought, hey, if people are interested in this, and this is something that I haven't actually thought about, from beginning to end, what if I could let this memoir, or the collection of this writing, kind of do the thing where, the readers are led by association from piece to piece. So like with the moments of fracture into poem, when something traumatic happens, for me as a young person, the space of poetry, all of a sudden what it does is it takes the pressure off of, the chronological truth, and it allows it to kind of expand into kind of speculation. And so, there are actual speculative chapters in like what I imagine my family would have said when they found themselves. And the poetry also, like, it feels like it's like new and revolutionary. And I don't mean to depoliticize this, because I did spend a lot of time thinking about genre in this way, but also it's rooted in a kind of Caribbean storytelling. When my family would sit together and we would tell stories, it would be this story leads into that story. Someone breaks out into song inevitably. We go back to the focus, and so-and-so's brother did this too. And so when I was thinking around the genre, I really held that in my mind as well, to think about, okay, well, how would this make the most kind of sense for folks who are like maybe sitting around a table, and I wanted to really weave together the many different manynesses that I belong to. And I had a lot of practice being from a Caribbean background. It's, I've had teachers say things like the Caribbean was globalized long before globalization was a thing. And so thinking about, the Caribbean space as, settler colonized, as well as kind of like many empires in transit, opens up this kind of way of storytelling for me personally.
I love the elasticity of language, the manynesses, as you said, that the book entails. And that is not only how stories, they get other stories, they open up to new universes, but also how languages coexist in the book. The book has portions in Sanskrit, the book obviously has sections in English, but it has also an attempt to, I think, almost like The Hobbit, creates a new language or a series of alternative languages in order to reproduce the societies that fostered these languages. I'd like to ask you to do two things, Rajiv. One is to talk about the various languages of the book. That is an aspect that I hold very dearly because, I don't know, 35 years into my immigration to the United States, I never feel as if I have arrived to the English language. The English language is so vast, so complex, so daunting, and yet so warm and motherly, that I'm always exploring it. But I love the inventiveness, that the way that you use accents in your book, and recreate the language of your grandmother and other members of the family language.
Yeah, well, thank you for this question. I mean, it's clearly one of the things that is really moving to me, as well as, poet, translator, and, memoirist, now that I can say. And first of all, like, I have to, express my incredible gratitude to you for seeing the value in the use of these languages, right? I mean, that's not something that I grew up seeing a lot in literature, and my family coming from, communities like on my dad's side where education and literacy weren't huge in, in their wheelhouse as they survived in Guyana, South America. The languages that I write in are in English, of course. There is Guyanese Creole, which in my family they call Creolese, or there are ways of also deriding the language, such as like calling it broken English. There's also kind of like this umbrella language called Caribbean Hindustani, which means any kind of South Asian language from from the Indian subcontinent to the Caribbean that's not Tamil, for example, or specifically, that has kind of like merged together into making these kind of different dialects. So there's Suriname Hindustani, what they speak in Suriname. My dad grew up across the river from Suriname in Guyana. And so the language that his mother spoke and her speech community spoke in was Guyanese Bhojpuri. And that's the language that I write in and out of. I say that in the beginning here, I approach this language as kind of with humility and respect, because it's not a language that I am native fluent in. I am more studied in Western Standard Hindi, and through the lens of Western Standard Hindi and American English, am I able to access Guyanese Creole and Guyanese Bhojpuri as spoken by my grandmother. So it was not until I started to dream in Guyanese Bhojpuri that I felt comfortable to write in it. Like I would have these dreams where I'd encounter people and I would speak, and like they would tell me that this was the language. So that's how I would know. And so these are the languages that I use here. And imagining also, like, I mean, as a 20-year-old, I was blessed with some kind of, presence of mind to be able to sit with my grandmother and record her for hours and hours as we talked. She would teach me her old songs. There's transcriptions in the book,
Right.
all in her language. And so when it came time to writing things out in a reconstruction of her language, it was easy because I had this vast archive to draw on.
Yeah. I want you to read a little section where our viewers, the audience, can get a taste of those sounds of the I don't know, broken English sometimes can feel as if it is incomplete, but to me it feels more complete than full-fledged standardized English. But I also, at some point, either before or after, Rajiv, would love to ask you more about dreaming in your grandmother's language or in the other languages. What are the sounds that you hear? I, for one, also speaking as a speaker of different languages, never can hear. I know that people in my dream are speaking different languages, but can never hear them. I know what they are saying, but cannot, and there's no subtitles. So the fact that you can do this, it's delicious. But read something to us, and then maybe you say something about the dreaming.
Okay, so thank you for that. I'm going to be reading, a little bit of the narration where Aji actually tells me a story about gay people in the village, and this is kind of like, it's actually my father's story that I've recreated as though Aji were telling me.
And Aji is your grandmother.
Yeah, Aji is grandmother, my paternal grandmother.
Right.
So, I get lost sometimes, grandmother, because it's like, well, which one? I'm just like talking to my partner about like, okay, let's get this. Can you be more clear, please? Okay. Krabot Creek Bengewat one dem body bin called Burley. हमने ओके गर्ली बुलावे रहे काहे कि ऊ का बोले हम ऊ Antiman rahe. He been love one ex-man from 79 village and all but even a sadi. Or sadi kare biba kare ki time aa gaye. The night before ilawa, he been take out one bottle milk and sub piye hai. You know what that why you know? Jaharia, with an pregnant girl the steak when you shame you mumam pupa. Like when you get one piknini belly or saram lagila, then you go piye the thing and say, oh garo, hum apan my bap ki saram de. Well, girl ke papa, na bin no son bin a drink jaharia, I carry him go to hospital. When them a buje de lawa, girl ke boyfriend bin a gump on one horse and take him till a new Amsterdam side. Bad me, them in left mati and girly go back to papa house for biba kare. E time okar my baap oke jaharia khilawe rahe taki u girly ke maro tak le jaye. Aisan karis ke u na bhag sake or likey se biba kare. Till now, he married and he met Pickney and then stay at Wisconsin.
Beautiful, beautiful. And just before you say something about the dreams, as a publisher, we are always alert and attuned to the fact that that the book should not lose readers because that is what a book does. The book opens itself up and it has an obligation to surrender itself to the knowledge that the reader already has. But your book does something altogether different. Your book invites the reader to get lost, to hear other sounds, to awaken itself into the realization that immigration is really a concert, a symphony of voices that come from the past, extending to the future. It was a beautiful read. Tell me about your dreams.
Thank you. I also like of this language. I like to say that it is a South Asian language wrought in the Americas. So it is an Asian American language, which is an interesting thing to think about.
Yes.
So about the dreams, I think it's because of my state of always being a student or wanting to be a student that the people in my dreams will point out the fact that this is called this. So it might be my subconscious mind saying that this is in this language. How will you respond? Kind of how is this coded? I mean, that's like what my rational mind will say. My magical mind, the mind that I feel is in contact with my ancestors, is that what that mind says to me is that these are your ancestors actually telling you and giving you kind of like allowance and permission. And I say this because it's before things like happen, I dream of not just my aji, but also my nani, my two grandmothers, or people who I actually, see in the other in dream space. But like you say, it's hard to know exactly like which specific language, and I think like it's context based, right? Who's saying what to whom? My internal language in my dreams is English. However, sometimes it's like my mind will point out the fact that this person is using this particular word that has this history. And I think it's usually when I'm like engaged in the drafting phase, or like considering, so much depends upon one single word, and thinking about the meticulousness that is required to go back and through that.
My next question, Rajiv, it has to do with the two, maybe I will use the words totemic figures in your book. On the one hand, your grandmother, Hari, who is the storyteller, the song deliverer, and the root and the compass that you have. She and you create a kind of intimate, maybe even secret connection that results in all sorts of discombobulations, I would say. Other people get jealous at how close you are with your grandmother. They also think that you're appropriating her words when you translate some of her songs and you deliver them and you're profiting from them. So your grandmother is this, as I see her, as a kind of fountain of life that you choose and you are chosen by in order to be the person who you are. And then there's the figure of your father in between your grandmother and you, harsh, challenging, not ever quite recognizing you for who you are, but on the other hand, the needed element in order for you to prove yourself. the force that is always telling you no, 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 in order for you to say yes, yes, yes. So the question is this. The question has to do with having published the book. I remember, Rajiv, when I published my memoir at the beginning of the 2000s, that I felt two things. One is, wow, this book is me. This is what I have chosen to give everybody else. Is it really me? Did I leave things out? Did I curate my life in such a way to make others feel more attracted, more compelled to like me? So I want to ask you, on the one hand, what is it that you feel the memoir is to you now? And the second is probably harder. Are some members of your family going to dislike it thoroughly? And if so, what are you to do?
These are important questions, and they cost a lot emotionally. As I go through the memoir and the editing process and the rewrites, it was definitely in the forefront of my mind, thinking about whether or not this is me. The memoir itself ends in 2010.
Right.
And so like I give myself the space to be like, okay, well, I've changed since then, and this is not really me. People will one day learn, if I write another memoir, it'll be about, this X, Y, and Z. And so like I give myself that space, but I think what you're like the realizations that I have in the book, like, who is making those realizations? Rajiv from where is thinking about these things? And yeah, I mean, I think that it's as you say, I'm opening myself up in a way so people can learn my story in a different medium. Dear friends of mine that I've had for ages have read the book, and they were like, oh, we knew these stories. We didn't realize exactly, how it was connected and all of these things. We've heard, the shadows of these stories. And I felt like when people say that to me, I felt such responsibility that I was like, I've examined this responsibility again and again and again, but I'm the kind of person who is always doubting whether or not I did the ethical thing. So there's that part. The other part about the family who are going to read this and be upset, well, that's, I think I am presenting the story of my relationship with my grandmother, and I don't fault any of my family for the ways that they've needed to live in order to survive. Definitely coming to this country, we were, in financial ruins. My parents did the best that they could to give us a comfortable life, or a life in which we would have access to education systems that they didn't necessarily have. So that part of it is something that, the 2021 Rajiv can look at and say, like, okay, I understand this is a survival mechanism. The 2001 Rajiv is like, I'm going to burn this all down when I grow up and when I leave this home. In fact, it was a joke between my mom and dad growing up that, Rajiv is going to be the one who grows up and writes a tell-all book about our family. And like, I mean, self-fulfilling prophecy, I don't know, or maybe like I've always been on the periphery and gathering stories. I mean, God, maybe that's just who I am in the world, especially with my grandmother and my family. That, folks are going to have a problem with this because it's the parts of my grandmother that they didn't necessarily want to see. The parts that they felt as though they evolved past, because she was unlettered, very, very rural woman who had so many children that the calcium in her body was so depleted that she had no teeth. So it's a different kind of worldview, and in order for them to actually have access to education and to like moving to Britain or to the US, they had to turn their backs on a lot of things. And so I think my grandmother's positionality represented those things that held them back. So yeah, when we were confronted with that, and especially through the character of father, through my father, the character of my father, so you see these defense mechanisms going
right.
With my father and my relationship with him that you get a taste of here. He is very much conflicted, right? He's a conflicted human, whether or not he should embrace me or not. I mean, I don't think that it's much of a question at the end of the book what he chooses, unfortunately for me. But I think that, there are lessons that are hard won. I mean, he lived in Britain, and my mom also lived in Britain in the time of the English National Front, the anti-South Asian violence that happened in the country. There's family stories of my mom being attacked on the street, and why we left, and all of these things coming together. I think at the end of all of this, part of my charge was, validating my Aji. All my life, I was told that she was broken, that we were broken, that she doesn't know that she doesn't know. Well, I wonder, God, and I hope somewhere she can hear and see that, I'm talking to you now about her words that are now published in a book. This is beyond what she would have ever dreamt of, as she milked cows and planted rice in Guyana. So,
yeah. I have two more questions, and I want to first go to one that is connected with the itinerant life that you and your family have led. One thing that the book does from very early on, and it's connected with the languages, is the journeys that go from India to Canada, to the Caribbean, to the United States, various parts of the United States. And you, in turn, instead of settling in one place, you carry on with this transnational effort of trying to hear the voices and going to the roots. And so maybe a rather simple, but deceitfully simple question, Rajiv, if you were the new edition of the OED, how would you define the word home?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, that's one of those really plastic words, right, that can fit and be shaped. For me personally, I think home is in motion, being in motion. It's something that I've descended from constant migration, that it's something that I'm carrying forward even now as I moved to Boston, someplace my family has never lived. And I think about that. And I think about kind of chosen family, or a family of folks who resonate with me on a soul level, and whether or not that, I guess dovetailing on home is also family. And I think expressing this idea of who the family is and how it's chosen is something that, is up for constant revision. I imagine right now my definition of that would be those who I support and those who support me would count in that way. But then there's also the very primal level of, the consanguineous relationships of people who share DNA ancestry, and how that used to be, for survival, kith and kin were the people that you would go to who would protect you because you belonged. Now, I think things are different. When I was really taken aback by a couple of folks that I was talking to, Dr. Natasha Sharma, for example, and Aiko Day, and they were talking about, what does it mean, community? Well, I mean, does that mean my ethnic community? Does that mean to the people that I interact with every day, my neighbors who I don't really talk to very often? Or does it mean something else, my intellectual community, how these things form? And so, with that also is I'll add that kind of, I'll overlay that set of problematics on top of home. I wrote this line that I was so impressed with myself for, but there's all kinds of holes in it. But I say, to be coolie, to be, to belong to the Indian labor diaspora is to be in constant motion. And whether that means being ascribed a kind of category by American patterns of racialization, or by Pan-Korean, Caribbean patterns of racialization, of Guyanese, of also how in the most intimate spaces do we consider ourselves, the kind of identity markers that we use. And these are all avatars of home and expressions of home, but it's so complicated by the emotional, by the familial, by the queer family as well. So.
Yeah, beautiful. I have another question, kind of a wrapping up question, but I want to invite the audience to send comments, reflections for Rajiv, or for me, or for anybody. And Shady is having them there, and as soon as we wrap up this section of the program, we would love to open up and engage others. So please send your comments by doing it in the chat, and we'll be sure to pay attention to them. Here's the question to you, and it's a question, Rajiv, that has been asked to me a number of times. It's a difficult question too. You play out in the book the role of the outcast. You are an outcast in your family, you're an outcast in your culture, you're an outcast in the United States. And the word outcast actually often is used as a synonym of an outsider. You are constantly referring to yourself as an outsider. And it strikes me because I have the same metabolism that you benefit from the role of being an outsider. You don't want to be an insider. And yet the question that I have for you is this. You have a wonderful position in a terrific school. You have won prizes. You are read broadly. How sustainable is the role of an outsider when you are on the inside in many ways? Or at least this book is an announcement that you have gone from being on the outside of certain circles to the insider. And I wonder if that can steal from you the edge that you have been building, which is to see things from, everybody else's, against everybody else's perspective.
Things that I have not considered. What would it mean to no longer?
I mean, being successful is a challenge.
Well, thank you for this. I think, as far as being on the inside, you're right. I mean, I see my position now as a way or as a place for me to kind of create, to make space for other people, especially people from my community, whether that's my intellectual community, my familial community, or my ethnic community, or geopolitical community. And so I have been trying to kick down as many doors as I possibly can. The inclusion of, these Caribbean Englishes in this book is also part of that. And, thinking about the face of what North American writing can look like, and how invested I am in actually living in my body and in my languages instead of, taking them off. So in some ways, I will always be that outsider, the great grandchild of indentured laborers. I marvel at the fact that, I'm teaching English. When 2 generations ago, nobody spoke English,
right?
As such, and nobody, on my dad's side, nobody read and wrote. My mom's father, however, was able to read and write. So, I mean, there's that aspect of also access, but after her marriage and the alienation from her side of the family, we didn't really have access to those folks. So I think that's something that I will have to think critically on as I move forward, in my life, as to how to see the people on the outside and how to be as inclusive as possible. And I think that definitely feels like kind of like a sacred duty, given the fact of my success and my good luck, and for people on the outside also who have seen me on the outside.
Yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure to read you in manuscript form, to read you in printed page form, and now to talk to you and be able to ask you questions that I had once I was one of the 3 judges reading this manuscript for the first time. Shady, let's go back to you. Maybe there are some questions or some comments, and if not, we can continue.
We do have a few questions coming in. Thank you both for a really rigorous conversation. I was riveted as you bounce these ideas back and forth. Let's see, Melody asks, thank you both. This was such a beautiful discussion to bear witness to. Were there particular pieces of literature or authors that inspired you as you were writing Antiman?
Ooh, that's such a wonderful question. I think I'll cap myself so I don't like talk too much about this. Excuse me, but Rigoberto Gonzalez, somebody whose books I admire, especially Autobiography of My Hungers. That was a book that was hugely instrumental in that there's a poem that's threaded throughout, you know, these little vignettes. So there was this book. There's also, you know, Rolling the R's by R. Zamora Lindmark, which is a book written by a Filipino person living in Hawaii, who also writes in Hawaiian English Creole, that blends genre into, you know, this kind of beautiful smudge across the page where we had really like lived experience here. I'll also say Jerkarn Occupant. It's a book of poems, or it's a book of poems as a memoir by the Canadian writer named Shalene Knight. And that book was really, 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 really important for me. As well as, of course, like, you know, other memoirs by poets. Joy Harjo has, you know, Crazy Brave, which was like really such a fantastic thing. You know, Leah Lakshmi Peepsna Samarsena has a book called Dirty River, A Femme of Color Dreams Her Way Back Home, which was also about, you know, somebody living in New York City, you know, and in Toronto during this like time of South Asian activism that was really inspiring to me. And I'm a fan of their poetry as well. So, yeah, this is my truncated answer. So
Thank you. Yes, I'm sure our viewers are kind of scribbling those names down as we speak. Another question here. Andre is actually asking a question that I was planning on asking you myself, so this is very convenient for me. Andre asks, did you discover anything about yourself by re-examining your life story through extended prose in this way? Have song and poetry influenced your approach to writing prose?
Ooh. So I'm imagining this is Andre Bagu, who is also a writer and poet who I admire from the Caribbean. He's a Trinidadian poet and writer. Thank you, Andre, for the question, my God. And this is the total Andre kind of question too, as he does this in his work. I think about what I found about myself is that I actually like prose, which that's like a superficial answer, and then I'll get into like a deeper answer. I really actually like prose. As a poet, I always like laughed at the fact of prose, and then like, yeah, you prose people are different. I mean, I think that's definitely the ways in which, you know, we think about, you know, the MFA, or like, you know, what it means to be in the writing world. It's like, what is your genre? Pick one. Queerness, though, kind of lets you to step off of that track. And I was really blessed with, I keep saying the word blessed. I was really lucky to have instructors and teachers like Nicole Cooley, who writes in multiple genres, and Kamiko Han, who blurs genres. And so that's, you know, on the superficial side, that's what I saw. Like, I don't actually have this kind of arbitrary genre fidelity. You know, another thing that I found as I was writing this is like just how much angst from, you know, this time of my life has not necessarily been resolved by either by writing the book or by letting these stories be outside of me now, which was one of the things that I was thinking of too as I came to it. Meaning, like, I don't have answers that I thought would be easy answers, right? Like, so what do I make of this? Like, how do I take my grandmother songs and cycle them forward instead of having them be static in a book? So there's this.
Before you go on, Shidi, I want to add at one point to what Rajiv, you were saying. You know, you were reflecting on how MFA programs channel people to do prose, or to do, and in that nonfiction or fiction or poetry, or you can do theater, as if already restricting their sense of experimentation was going to be much more productive to them, because you can only be a poet, or you can only be a prose writer, and so on. And I love the rebelliousness that you show in the book of saying, I can jump from one to another, and all these selves are me too. But I wanted to add to this the fact that, you know, when I traveled to Latin America, I'm originally from Mexico, bookstores are not divided into fiction, nonfiction, poetry. Bookstores have literature. Everything is alphabetical, and it is up to the reader to decide, oh, this is poetry, or this is in many ways, it goes outside or beyond what the MFA programs do. Our kind of marketing world shapes those forums as kind of a isolating neighborhoods, when there are so many writers that are in the section of poetry that I would change to the section of prose, or from the section of fiction to the section of nonfiction. What I love, and I think that what Latin America does so well, is breaking those borders, bringing down those walls, including in the form of literary genres.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and I do think that there is value in concentrated study into genre. Absolutely, I think that's without a doubt. But then the idea of like not being able to let your mind change its rules, it changes something about our approach to the page. I mean, and this is how capitalism drives expectation and craft.
Yeah.
The question that I have for you is, now that this sort of magical, mystical piece of deeply personal literature is facing the public, what are some reactions or expectations that you're looking forward to exploring as people begin to react to this book? Or what do you foresee happening as people begin to react to this book?
I think that people are going to, actually, I have no idea. Thinking about this, like even being read is like, of course, it's mind blowing at this point still, because it's just such a different perspective, or first person that's in this book that feels like something very, very close to me in a way that poetry doesn't always feel that kind of close. Yeah, I mean, as far as my expectations, I expect a lot of my friends and family to read it, and to at least buy the book. To read it, that's another thing, because they have me, right? And they don't necessarily need to do it. But the people who have read my work, I've gotten such beautiful messages and pictures from people holding my book, and lines that resonate with them. And one of the things that I'm finding is that it's not the things that I expect for people to like, for them to like. I was expecting people to be a little bit more thrown by the chaos of the poem and the time compression in the poems. But I think a lot of people are responding that they actually feel good as like restful places of like interlude. And so that's been something that's been amazing for me. I'm looking forward to connecting with a lot more prose writers in the future to constantly like strive to have writing that can live up to my expectations for myself. So
thank you. Yes, something that struck me about this book is that this hybrid format maps very closely onto the way that memory works in the human spirit and in the human mind. And I know we have just a few more minutes, and I'll take another second to remind our viewers that you can add more questions in the comments if you would like to ask a few more questions. But until they do, I'd love to hear some thoughts of yours about, what is memory for you, and how does it take form? Obviously, it took form in this book, in this memoir for you. But how does memory sort of interact with you in your daily life?
I am a very nostalgic person. I have a lot of things that I keep around me. Excuse me. And so for me, memory is often triggered by objects, right? And definitely in the writerly Rajiv, memories are triggered by objects. And I think about compounding associations. So when we come face to face with, let's say, a slate coaster. Well, there's something about that substance that reminds me of being a child in my parents' London home. They had this big slate ashtray that I remember, according to family stories, I pulled it down and it split my toe open while they were having like a party. And they took me to my uncle, who was a dentist, who stitched me up right there.
Ooh.
Yeah, pretty, like it's a funny story. And the object of that slate ashtray is also something that I think about, when thinking about ashtrays in general. So, and I don't know, this is just like an example of the way that like an object can trigger memory. And like on my writing desk here, I have this, coaster that is made out of slate. So it's when I look at it, I see the story of that poster, but then also one of the shades is the memory that I have with the substance of the object. And so if that exists in this kind of like affective, history of all of the objects around me, then I think the memoir does that too, but in a way that, like I said, I organized it like a book of poems. And so that's how I would do the poem organization. But with this memoir, there is a closer following of time. Like, so for example, the flashbacks do occur, but they're not as though we're taken back to the beginning of the story and then going through the whole, so if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. We have a few more minutes. I see that Adiba asks, so wonderful to hear you talk about Antiman. What are things you're looking forward to?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Adiba, for that question. I'm looking forward to, with the book, I'm looking forward to hearing what people think. I'm really excited to have this in the world, and it's a physical object. As a physical object, it's quite remarkable. The colors, the way that it's been produced, everything about it. Like, I'm really looking forward to, I look forward to the physical copy very much. And there's one on my desk, there's one behind me, there's one on my bedstand, there's one everywhere. So I kind of like have filled my space with copies of this book. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing the thoughts, be they positive and negative, to think about how to drive my next writing.
Thank you. On that note, speaking of driving your next writing, I'd love to hear where our viewers can keep up with you and keep track of your work, and stay tuned for your next project as they're still reeling from this work that's now out.
Thank you. You can find me on my website. It's at www.rajivmohabir.com. Or you can follow me at Rajiv Mohabir on Instagram, Twitter. I'm also on Facebook. It's spelled Mohabir, it's pronounced Mahabir, which you'll also know as you read the book. So kind of, but Mohabir.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. We have a few more minutes. I would like to invite you to offer your salutations to our audience. If you have any words you'd like to share.
I do want to share something, Shady and Rajiv. I simply want to celebrate Lost City Books as an independent bookstore. For us that are in the business of being independent publishers, they are invaluable friends. They are essential partners. And as a reader and as a teacher and as a writer and as a citizen, I see them as essential for our democratic conversation, who we are, how we see the world, the changing nature of what this country is and should be. It happens in the bookstores. It happens when we open the books. It happens when we share our comments with others. I think that for me, the bookstores are like the temple to our culture. And I truly thank you guys for the work that you do, that you keep on doing, and that we sometimes in our discussions say, yes, let's have another book there so that people at Lost City Books might invite us back for some discussion.
I love it. Thank you. Yes, we're so happy to be a part of this community. So your words mean a lot to hear to us. I am representing Lost City Books.
Absolutely.
And saying, expressing gratitude for your very kind words. And I'd like to, again, thank you, Rajiv, for coming in and discussing your incredible book. I'm so moved by it. And I really encourage everyone watching tonight, if you haven't already, to come on down to Lost City Books or hop onto our website, www.lostcitybookstore.com, and grab your copy, because you will not regret it even a little bit. And without further ado, I'd like to bid you both good night.
Thank you.
Unless Rajiv, you had one last thing to say. You look like you were going to say something else.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for making space. I'm really thrilled to be in conversation and to see my book behind you. It means so much, and thank you. And thank you, Ilan, also for engaging me here tonight.
Pleasure.
Thank you both, and good night to all of our viewers. Come back next time. We will always